One Wednesday night, I was sitting on the couch, unwinding after a long day, when I heard a knock on the door. It was late, 9:45 p.m. to be exact. I wasn't expecting anyone, especially not at that hour. I hesitated for a moment, wondering who it could be, then got up and walked to the door. When I opened it, I saw two people standing there. They were both dressed in old-fashioned suits, the kind you don't really see anymore. For a second, I thought they were cops. Something about the way they stood and looked at me, serious and a little intimidating. One was a man, and the other was a woman. They didn't introduce themselves right away, which only made me more uneasy. "Are you John?" the man asked, his voice low and firm. I nodded, feeling my stomach tighten. "Yeah, I'm John," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. They exchanged a glance before the woman spoke up. "Do you know someone named Sarah?" I was confused. Why were they asking me about Sarah? My thoughts raced. "No," I said, frowning. "I don't know anyone named Sarah." But before I could say more, Sarah appeared at the door. I hadn't even realized she'd come to the door behind me. Her face was pale, and her eyes were wide with fear. "What's going on? Who are these people?" I asked, turning to her. But she didn't answer. She just stood there, looking as scared as I felt. Something was clearly wrong. The woman, who I now assumed was in charge, spoke again. "We're detectives," she said calmly, though there was an edge to her voice. "We're investigating an attack, and we need to talk to both of you." I blinked in surprise, the words not fully sinking in. "An attack? What attack?" "I don't know anything about any attack," I said, more defensively than I meant to. The woman detective glanced at Sarah again before turning her attention back to me. "The victim is badly hurt," she said, her tone growing more serious. "He mentioned that Sarah was there when it happened." I felt like the floor dropped out from under me. Sarah? Involved in some kind of attack? I couldn't believe it. My heart started racing as I turned to her. "What is she talking about?" I asked, my voice sharper now. But Sarah didn't answer. She just stood there, frozen, tears welling up in her eyes. I couldn't take it anymore. "Who's the victim?" I asked the detective, trying to make sense of it all. "His name is Michael," she said. The name didn't ring a bell. "I didn't know any Michael." "Do you know him?" she asked. "No, I don't," I said, shaking my head. Why would Sarah have anything to do with this? The detective's eyes shifted to Sarah. "She was with him when he was attacked," she said. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "What?" I asked, incredulous. "Why would you be with some guy named Michael?" I demanded, turning to Sarah. My voice was rising now, my confusion mixing with anger. She looked down, avoiding my gaze, and that's when I knew something was very wrong. Sarah started to cry, her shoulders shaking as she tried to hold it together. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to comfort her, but another part of me was too angry to care. I needed answers. "Tell them what happened," I shouted at her, unable to control my frustration any longer. "Just tell the truth, Sarah." Finally, she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "I was having an affair with him," she said, her words slow and deliberate, like she was choking on them. "With Michael." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The room seemed to spin around me as the reality of what she just said sank in. I stared at her, shocked, unable to comprehend what I'd just heard. "You're a cheater?" I finally spat out, my voice dripping with betrayal. Sarah's sobs grew louder as she covered her face with her hands, but I didn't care anymore. My anger had taken over. How could she do this to me? The detectives exchanged a look, and without saying much more, they left us standing there. As the door closed behind them, the silence in the room was deafening. I stood there for a moment, not knowing what to do. Everything I thought I knew had just been torn apart in a matter of minutes. I couldn't stay. I couldn't be in the same house with her anymore. Without a word, I turned and went upstairs, my mind racing. I grabbed a suitcase from the closet and started throwing clothes into it. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay here. Not with her. As I packed my things, I heard her crying downstairs. Part of me felt sorry for her, but the anger was too fresh, too raw. I zipped up my bag, walked down the stairs without looking at her, and headed for the door. I was done. I couldn't live with Sarah anymore. I needed to get out, find a new place, and start over. And that's exactly what I was going to do. Friday started off like any other day. I was at the office, going through my usual routine, and everything seemed perfectly normal. My secretary, Emily, came into my office just before lunch, holding the phone to her chest as if it carried some kind of secret. She looked slightly concerned. "You've got a call," she said, her voice soft. "It's a detective. His name's Dave." I raised an eyebrow, surprised. A detective? The last time I spoke to anyone from the police was a couple of days ago when they came by the house, and that was about Sarah and her affair. I felt a pit form in my stomach. Something wasn't right. "Put him through," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. When I picked up the phone, I could hear the deep, calm voice on the other end. "Hello, is this John?" "Yeah, this is John. What's this about, detective?" "I'd like to meet with you today." "It's important," Detective Dave said. His voice was professional, but there was a weight to it that made me feel uneasy. I frowned, already feeling a mix of confusion and worry. "Can you tell me what this is about?" "I'm afraid I can't discuss it over the phone." "It's better if we meet in person," he replied. That only made my anxiety grow. If it was serious enough to avoid talking about it on the phone, it couldn't be good. After thinking it over for a moment, I agreed. "All right, I can come by your office around 7 p.m. "Thank you, John. I'll see you then," he said before hanging up. I sat there for a moment, staring at the phone, my mind racing with all kinds of thoughts. What could this be about? Was it connected to Sarah's affair? The attack? I couldn't shake the feeling that something bad was coming. I decided to call Sarah to tell her about the detective wanting to meet with me, but when I dialed her number, it went straight to voicemail. That wasn't unusual. She was probably still at work, but it added to my growing unease. I left her a message, quickly explaining the situation, and then hung up. After a few minutes, I tried calling her again, but no luck. No answer. Now, I was really starting to worry. Why couldn't I reach her? Was something wrong? I couldn't focus on anything at work after that. I just sat at my desk, waiting for the hours to pass, my mind drifting back and forth between the detective's call and the unsettling silence from Sarah. When I finally got home, it was already late in the afternoon. I still hadn't heard from Sarah, and my nerves were frayed. I kept pacing around the house, checking my phone every few minutes, waiting for it to buzz with a message or call. I didn't know what to expect from the detective's visit, but I couldn't help feeling that things were about to get worse. At last, I heard the front door creak open. Sarah walked in, looking tired but surprised to see me waiting by the door. I wasted no time telling her about the detective's call. "A detective called me today," I said. "His name is Dave. He wants to meet me tonight." Sarah's face went pale, her eyes wide with alarm. "What? Why? Did he say what it was about?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "No, he didn't," I replied, watching her closely. "He wouldn't tell me over the phone. He said we need to talk in person." Sarah's hands trembled a little as she set her purse down, but she didn't say much more. She just looked worried, and I couldn't help but wonder if she knew something I didn't. At 7 p.m. sharp, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Detective Dave standing there, dressed in a suit, his expression serious. He stepped inside and wasted no time getting straight to the point. "When did you find out about Sarah's affair with Evan?" he asked, his words hitting me like a truck. I blinked, completely caught off guard. "Evan?" I stammered. "Who's Evan?" My mind was spinning. First Michael, now Evan? I didn't know what to think. The detective looked at me carefully, gauging my reaction. "Sarah was having an affair with a man named Evan. When did you find out?" "I didn't know about it until now," I said, my voice shaky. "I was heartbroken when I found out about Michael. And now, this?" I trailed off, unable to process what was happening. My chest felt tight. I was already reeling from Sarah's betrayal, and now there was more to the story. How many secrets was she hiding? The detective nodded slowly. "I understand. This must be difficult for you." Then, his eyes shifted slightly. "Is Sarah here?" I shook my head. "No, she's not here. She left when I got home earlier." The detective paused, then asked the question I dreaded. "Do you know who attacked Evan?" "No," I said quickly. "I don't know anything about that." I was at work when it happened. My secretary, Emily, can confirm that. I've been here the whole time. Detective Dave studied me for a moment, then nodded again. I believe you, John, he said. I'm sorry about everything that's happened. I hope Sarah comes back soon. After he left, I felt a strange sense of relief, but it was mixed with sadness. I was glad he believed me, but the realization of what was happening with Sarah weighed heavily on me. I knew that I couldn't keep living like this. Sarah and I were done. I had no choice but to move on. I was going to miss her, but it was time to get a divorce and start over. My life was changing, and I had to accept it. A few months had passed since everything went down with Sarah, and on one chilly evening, I found myself sitting at a bar, nursing a drink. It had become somewhat of a habit, coming here after work, sitting quietly with my thoughts. The bar was dimly lit, the low hum of conversations filling the space, but I wasn't paying much attention to anything around me. My mind was drifting, as it often did, back to Sarah. I hadn't heard from her in months. No calls, no messages, nothing. Part of me wondered if she'd ever come back. Not that I wanted her to, at least, that's what I kept telling myself, but I couldn't shake the thoughts of her. It was strange how someone could hurt you so deeply, and yet they still linger in your mind. I thought about Evan too. I was glad that he was recovering, but I also couldn't help but feel a dark sense of satisfaction knowing that his injuries meant he might have a hard time having more kids in the future. Maybe it wasn't the most noble thought, but after everything that had happened, I didn't feel guilty about it. Sitting next to me at the bar was Chase, a buddy of mine who was going through something similar. He was in the middle of a messy divorce, and like me, he was angry. Angry at his wife, angry at the world, angry at how everything had fallen apart. We both had our reasons to be bitter. Our wives had cheated on us, and though the sting of betrayal was fresh, there was also a twisted relief in knowing the truth. At least now, we didn't have to live in ignorance anymore. Chase took a swig of his beer, setting the bottle down with a little too much force. "You ever think about how lucky we are?" he asked, his voice laced with sarcasm. "Lucky to be rid of them?" I nodded, though I didn't feel particularly lucky. "Yeah," I muttered. "I guess it's better than living a lie." We sat in silence for a few minutes, both lost in our own thoughts, when a woman approached our table. She looked familiar, but I couldn't quite place her. She was wearing a sharp suit, her hair pulled back in a no-nonsense way. There was something about the way she carried herself that told me she wasn't just some random person in the bar. "I know you too," she said, her voice cutting through the din of the bar like a knife. Chase and I exchanged glances, unsure of how to respond. She must have seen our confusion because she quickly added, "I'm a detective. I've seen you at the lawyer's office." It clicked then. I had seen her around, but I had no idea she was a detective. Chase and I both looked surprised, and I could tell he was just as thrown off as I was. "We didn't know you were there," I said, trying to keep my voice casual, though my pulse quickened. Something about this felt off. The woman didn't waste any time. She got straight to the point. "I'm here because I'm looking into the attack on Evan," she said, her eyes narrowing slightly. "And I have reason to believe you too might know something about it." I felt my stomach drop. Chase shifted uncomfortably in his seat, and I could tell he was just as uneasy as I was. We had prepared for this possibility, but now that it was happening, I wasn't sure how to handle it. "We don't know anything about that," Chase said quickly. "We're just friends. We're both going through divorces, just trying to figure things out." The detective didn't look convinced. She crossed her arms, her gaze locking onto us. "Is that so?" she said, her tone skeptical. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you two might have more to do with this than you're letting on." I felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. I tried to stay calm, but it wasn't easy. "Look," I said, trying to sound as reasonable as possible. "We didn't do anything. We were both at work when it happened. We've got nothing to hide." She didn't budge. "Maybe," she said, her voice low and deliberate, "but I'm not done investigating, and I'm going to find out the truth." With that, she turned on her heel and walked away, leaving us sitting there, stunned. Neither Chase nor I said anything for a few moments. We just sat there, both of us trying to process what had just happened. Finally, Chase broke the silence. "What the hell was that?" he muttered, his voice shaky. She's on to us, man. I didn't say anything right away, but he was right. The detective's suspicions were clear. She wasn't going to let this go, and we both knew exactly why. The truth was, we had a plan. A plan that we couldn't afford to let anyone, especially a detective, find out about. We need to be careful, I said quietly, my eyes darting around the bar as if someone might be listening. We can't let her find out what we did. Chase nodded, his expression tense. Yeah, no kidding. We're screwed if she does. We finished our drinks in silence, both of us too nervous to keep talking about it in public. We knew we had to leave, to get out of there before things escalated any further. As we stepped outside into the cool night air, the weight of what we were caught up in pressed down even harder. We were both scared, both nervous, and now, more than ever, we knew we had to keep our secrets buried deep. The detective was closing in, and one wrong move could send everything crashing down. A few months later, I found myself back at the same bar, drinking alone, thoughts of Sarah swirling in my mind. I wondered if she would ever return, but mostly, I thought about Evan. He was recovering, but part of me was still glad that he might have a tough time having kids after everything. It was a dark thought, but after what happened, I couldn't feel bad about it. Chase, my friend, was sitting next to me. He was in the middle of his own messy divorce, and we were both bitter about how things had ended with our wives. There was a twisted sense of relief in knowing they had cheated. At least now we knew the truth. Still, it didn't make things any easier. As we sipped our drinks and shared our frustrations, a woman suddenly approached us. She looked familiar, but I couldn't quite place her until she introduced herself as a detective. She said she had seen us at the lawyer's office. Chase and I exchanged glances, surprised. We had no idea she had been there. Without wasting any time, the detective got to the point. She asked if we knew anything about the attack on Evan. Chase and I immediately denied it, telling her we were just friends, nothing more. But she didn't seem convinced. Her eyes narrowed as she told us she thought we were involved. We tried to explain ourselves, insisting that we had nothing to do with it, but she wasn't buying it. She said she didn't care about our excuses and that she would keep digging until she found the truth. Her persistence made my heart race. As she walked away, Chase and I sat in silence, our minds racing. The detective was clearly suspicious, and we knew she wasn't going to drop the case easily. Panic started to settle in. We couldn't afford for her to find out about the plan. If she did, we were both going to jail. We quickly left the bar, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on us. The truth was too dangerous to come out, and now we had to be more careful than ever. One wrong move could ruin everything. A few months later, I found myself at the bar again, nursing a drink. My mind drifted to Sarah, wondering if she would ever come back, and then to Evan. He was healing, but I couldn't help feeling a sense of satisfaction knowing he might struggle with having kids after everything that had happened. Chase was there too, my old friend. He was going through his own bitter divorce, and we were both still reeling from the way our wives had betrayed us. There was some strange comfort in our shared misery, even though the anger lingered. As we sat there venting, a woman walked up to us. She introduced herself as a detective, saying she recognized us from the lawyer's office. Chase and I exchanged uneasy looks. We hadn't noticed her there before. She wasted no time and asked if we knew anything about Evan's attack. We both quickly denied it, insisting that we had nothing to do with it, just like before. But the detective wasn't buying it. She bluntly said she thought we were involved. We scrambled to explain, but she cut us off, saying she didn't care about our excuses. She was going to keep investigating, no matter what we said. My heart began to pound. Her suspicion was unsettling, and I knew she wasn't going to drop the case. Chase and I left the bar, trying to act calm, but the fear gnawed at both of us. The detective was clearly getting too close to the truth. If she uncovered our plan, we were finished. Jail seemed more and more likely with every step she took. We knew we had to be more careful. One slip, and everything would unravel. This is the end of today's story. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more captivating stories. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.